To celebrate the launch of Sugar and Spite, we've been playing through our Villainous collection.
All in order to bring you our favourite 10 villainous characters.
Hi, I'm Libby, this is Julian, and together we are BoxedMeeples. And yes, you may already know we love Villainous. We've been playing it for years now. I think my friend gifted me the base set right when it first launched. I've got a different version to you even, and we have been playing it together ever since.
Every time a new expansion comes out, we are on it straight away. And we play mainly at 2 players, but this game also works fantastically at larger player counts.
Yeah, particularly with some of the newer, different characters. I think they lend themselves towards a higher player count, maybe towards some of the others. But as you say, mostly we play it too.
Now, Villainous is an entirely asymmetrical game. Although you're playing by the same rule sets, each of the characters have different objectives and different ways of achieving their goal.
But everyone has their own villain deck and fate deck, of course.
So we've played through all the different combinations of characters together to bring you our favourite 10. So in the order of release, let's go through our favourite characters in Disney Villainous. So first up from me is the box star of the very first game, Maleficent. Now, when the game first came out, this was my favourite character, and retrospectively, it's probably one of the easier characters you can play if you're new to the game. All you have to do is really get 4 curses out on different areas you already have allies on. Now, the one fly in the ointment for this one is once those curses are placed out on the realm, there's various conditions that will remove those, that will displace those, and the only way you can win is actually if you start your turn with 4 curses out. So as soon as you get those 4 curses out, it pretty much transmits to the entire board. I'm a target, you want to fate me. So that's the one frustration you get while playing Maleficent.
Which is exactly how I won the last time we played, whilst you were playing Maleficent.
That's a good one to start with if you're new to the game.
So my first choice is also from the base set, but from the original base set, rather than the Introduction to Evil, which has been released since, and that is Jafar. And I think I can understand why they sort of moved him out of that introduction set. He does have a lot of finding of specific cards to be done. He has to unlock that cave before you can even get the lamp. And then with the lamp comes the genie, but you have to get the genie on your side. You have to get the lamp back where you need it to be. And obviously everything that's getting fated to you is trying to get in your way of that. And you do need, there are cards in the deck that help you find the cards you need, but you do need specific cards to come up in order to get this to work in time. But I do love that puzzle. I love the movie Aladdin. It's one of those kind of key ones from my youth. So I think sometimes how much you kind of bond with the movie and Villainous really does kind of aid and sway your liking to those particular villains as well. And I think, this is one of my favourites from the base set. I do honorary mention the Queen of Hearts is epic and she does something nice and different, but she hasn't quite made it over Jafar for me.
Now, one of my favourite villains in the whole Disney universe is Dr. Facilier, and he came in the Wicked to the Core expansion. It seems I gravitate towards complicated, risky characters because in this one, you've got a whole nother deck called the Fortune deck, which you'll be playing cards into. Your opponent will be adding cards to that with their fate cards. And then to win the game, you need to draw 3 cards from this Fortune deck and have a certain card come up without other cards coming up as well. You could be incredibly fortunate with your Fortune deck and the card comes up immediately. That's super duper. But on other occasions, I've played 5 draws of that Fortune deck and still not managed to win. So you do have to accept with Dr. Facilier, very exciting, but very risky. You can win easily, or you can really, really struggle with this game as you're just seeing all your opponents doing all the things they need to win the game.
Yeah, and I think your opponents can very much kind of get other things going on into your Fortune deck, which makes it more and more likely that you're not going to draw the thing that you need. Next up from me is Yzma, of course, from Emperor's New Groove, and she's from the Evil Comes Prepared set. And she does something very interesting with her fate deck as well. So instead of having one fate deck, there are 4 fate decks split evenly across the different locations. And you need to defeat a certain character in that fate deck with one of your other characters. So you're basically trying to find those 2 characters in order to be able to get to your end game condition. And there are cards in there that let you hunt through those mini fate decks on those locations, try and work out which one it's actually in. And there are other cards that let you play cards from the fate deck. So it's really playing with those fate decks and those different locations. And of course, your opponent can only choose one card from one of those fate decks every time they're fating you. So are they helping? Are they hindering your search for those 2 characters? I find it an interesting puzzle and yeah, quite fun.
One of my favourite characters from all of Villainous is actually Pete. Now, I love animation as an art form, so this character harks back to the early days of Disney with the early Mickey Mouse cartoons. As a result, the entire realm and the entire cards, everything Pete related is in black and white, which makes him visually very interesting in terms of the Villainous game. What's fun about Pete is there is different objectives every time you play. You're picking 4 from 5 and they're going to go into random locations in your realm. You know what they are, your opponent doesn't. So the better they know Pete, the quicker they'll work out what you're trying to do. But with Pete, the worst thing about playing him is that pesky Mickey Mouse. He can really affect what you're doing on your realm and really throw your plans back a stage. Having to get him off the board quickly becomes your priority as he prevents you from achieving any of your objectives. I think he's a very different character to a lot of the other ones in Disney Villainous, which often fall into a case of you need to get this card or you need to move certain things to this location, whereas Pete is doing all of those things, but kind of micro versions of them. So it kind of plays almost like a best of Villainous for me.
Next from me is one of my favourite Disney films, and that's Tangled and its mother Gothel. Now, she, of course, wants Rapunzel to stay in the tower, and she gains trust if Rapunzel stays in the tower. But of course, if you've seen the film, you'll know that Rapunzel doesn't like to stay in the tower. She likes to venture off. She wants to go to town. She wants to go and see those lights. And you have to keep luring her back to that tower and keep gaining those trust tokens. And it can be a tricky puzzle, especially when you get characters like Pascal coming out. Then you're ending up moving her along even further because Rapunzel moves at the end of every turn. So you have to keep doing that maintenance. And some games it can be quite tricky and you can think, oh, is there any way of doing this? But I mean, I really love the movie and I have had quite a lot of success with her actually. So I think there are definitely times when it can work in your favour.
Now, when it comes to expansions for Villainous, Oogie Boogie from Nightmare Before Christmas is a bit of an exception. He came in an expansion all on his lonesome called Filled with Fright, which actually makes him slightly trickier to find nowadays. Now, much like his character in Nightmare Before Christmas, he is controlled by dice rolls, and a lot of your cards you're playing is affected by what you roll on 2 dice. Of course, being Oogie Boogie, he's a bit underhanded and you can manipulate those dice. But if the dice don't roll in your favour, you're going to have such a hard time defeating Jack Skellington and winning with this character. Like I said before, I do like risky characters, and I've had games of this that just have not gone in my favour because those dice rolls haven't worked out. So much like many dice games that I really enjoy, you shouldn't really take him as your character if you don't prepare for a bit of luck mitigation and controlling those dice rather than those dice controlling you.
So my next pick is another great one for the spooky season. So maybe we should be Oogie Boogie and Horned King matchup for spooky season. This one is from Despicable Plots set, and of course the character is from Black Cauldron. And this one's interesting. It's got some similarities to Maleficent that you mentioned at the beginning, where you've got to get a certain number of things down on each of the locations, in this case Cauldron Born. And you can place a Cauldron Born at the beginning of your turn. If you have the correct cauldron, you can swap out an ancient soldier with a Cauldron Born. So it sounds super easy. But of course, getting the right cards in your hand at the right time to make everything work and make sure that the cauldron's in that active kind of play mode, that you haven't been fated and that's had to be turned over so it's not functioning, then obviously there are cards that let you flip that back over, so it's sort of working mode again. But it's a sort of step up in terms of what you need to do for Maleficent, in my mind, in terms of having things out in that different realms. But it's got a little bit trickier in terms of how you manage your hand and different things that you need at different times. But a really fun one to play, I find.
Yeah, I find it's one of the most advanced characters you can get in Villainous, but obviously that amps up the challenge of trying to win with him, and probably one of the best arts for any of the kind of character cards you find on him. Now, finally for me is King Candy from the latest expansion, Sugar and Spite. Now, I said earlier, I like really quirky villains, and you don't get much quirkier than King Candy, because you don't really control which locations he goes to in the realm. You have to go around the racetrack. And then there's very much a two-tiered character, because you need to get all your ducks in a line first before you can race Penelope, and then the winner of that race will determine if you're successful and win the realm, or if you have to go through another race. Now, by choosing which spot on the racetrack you go, you can actually be really mean with this character, because it can be a case of you being able to fate, if you've moved to certain places, kind of almost continuously, certain three times in a row, you'll be able to fate your opponent. If you can do this early doors, you can have a really commanding position. Sometimes you don't kind of necessarily feel in control of what's happening, particularly in the final race when cards determine how far Penelope goes. But as I was saying before, with Oogie Boogie, with these kind of chancy characters, you have to really have that in mind and have the right cards in your hand when you do take her on, so you can then make sure you're always staying ahead in the race and you are ultimately victorious with him. But yeah, character based on Wreck-It Ralph I didn't see that coming, but I'm really pleased it did, because Wreck-It Ralph is one of my favourite Disney films.
So last up from me, from bigger and badder, and I think she is bigger and badder to play, it's Madam Mim. Now, I think she is quite a tricky one, but I really love this challenge. I think for me, she's one of the most thematic in the series, because I feel like it really encapsulates that moment in the movie where Merlin and Mim are doing their magic wands, they're transforming into all of those different animals, and it takes that segment of Sword in the Stone and creates this whole Mim character around that moment. So instead of having a normal villain deck that has those allies and everything in there, you basically have a lot of Mim's transformations. And then there's also a deck with Merlin's transformations, and you start with one of those on the board, and certain ones of Merlin's transformations need to be defeated by a specific one of Mim's. And you've got to go through that cycle of defeating them with the right animals in the right sort of places. And so you really are trying to cycle through to find those right cards, which can be tricky. I'm always finding the right cards in Villainous, it seems. But I think it just encapsulates the movie for me, and is a quite exciting character to play.
I think what's great is you kind of favour those hunting for cards in the deck style characters, which obviously, if they're at the bottom of the deck, that's no good for you. You're getting through a lot of discarding cards actions. Well, I prefer the more chancy, high risk, high reward style characters where they are controlled by dice or by card draws or things like that, which is probably why you win so much more than me. But do let us know in the comments down below, what is your favourite Disney villainous character? And also, do you like the other villainous spin-offs? So you have the Star Wars villainous, and of course the Marvel villainous. Do let us know which of those games you prefer as well. And who do you want to see next in this series? Yeah, who do you imagine is going to be in the next expansion? Because hopefully this is going to be a series that keeps on giving and giving, because the more different characters get released, the more different combinations we can have. So the more different playing of games we will have. A good place, of course, to get Disney Villainous or any other board game is your friendly local game store. For us here in the southeast of England, our
friendly local game store is Chaos Cards. So do check out our link in the description below for a few pennies off at the checkout there if you're online shopping. And of course, if you've loved watching our content today, we would love if you would subscribe to the channel. It really does help us out. And we will see you next time for our next board game video, which we put up about twice a week.